On the day of the typhoon, my husband Eric's first love, Julia, invited me to go out to sea. On the way back, we encountered a violent storm. Our boat capsized, and both Julia and I were rescued and taken to the hospital. My husband Eric works as a doctor at the city hospital, and that day, it just so happened that he was on duty for emergency cases. Julia only suffered minor scratches, yet my husband rushed to her side without hesitation. He didn't spare a glance at me, lying right beside him, barely clinging to life. Chapter 1. When Julia and I were brought to the hospital, the first person I saw was my husband, Eric. Eric glanced at me and said, "Why did you take Julia deep-sea fishing? And during a typhoon? Do you even realize how dangerous that was?" "What?" I froze, completely caught off guard. It was Julia who invited me, even saying that Eric would be on the boat too, which was the only reason I went. But when we were heading back, we encountered the typhoon, and our boat capsized. I wanted to explain, but a sharp pain suddenly overwhelmed me, making it impossible to speak. Eric took one look at me and sneered coldly. "Stop pretending. Julia already told me on the way to the hospital that it was you who invited her, telling her to stay away from me." He stared at me with a look of disdain. I was gasping for breath, unable to speak. I wanted to reach out to Eric, to tell him that I was dying, to beg him to save me. But just as I managed to touch Eric's hand, he forcefully yanked it away. His attention had already shifted. Behind me, Julia was being helped off the ambulance by a nurse. Julia's face was streaked with tears, looking fragile and pitiful. The moment Eric saw her, it was as if his soul had left his body. He rushed toward her with quick steps. "Julia, are you okay?" He gripped Julia's hand tightly, his voice filled with concern. I felt my own hand drop weakly, as the stabbing pain in my chest worsened. I wanted to call out, but no sound would come out. Beside me, a nurse noticed something was wrong and quickly called out to Eric. "Doctor, Zoe's condition is deteriorating. You need to come over. She's faking it." Eric's cold, heartless words echoed behind me. Those words made the pain in my heart even more unbearable. Without any care for me, Eric led Julia upstairs, personally attending to her injuries. But Julia only had minor scrapes, nothing serious. The nurse, seeing that Eric was ignoring me, called for other doctors in a panic. After examining my condition, the doctors were at a loss. "Where's Eric? He's the only one who can save Zoe," one of the doctors said urgently. My husband was the best cardiologist at the city hospital. With the other doctors on leave, he was the only one who could save me. The nurse, with her head bowed, called Eric again. "I just saw her. What could possibly be wrong? Stop calling and bothering me." Eric snapped, hanging up abruptly, left with no other choice. The nurse called another doctor who was on vacation, but by the time that doctor arrived, it was too late. I watched from above, my soul floating in the air as they wheeled my lifeless body into the operating room, only to quickly wheel it back out. There was no need for surgery. I was already dead. Chapter 2. Eric and I grew up together. We were childhood sweethearts. My mom and Eric's mom were best friends, and our families were very close. When we were young, Eric's mother often traveled for business since her company was large, so she would leave Eric at our house to be taken care of. As a result, Eric and I were always together, and we became very close. He lived with us for 3 years, and during that time, my mom and his mom would always joke about how we should end up together when we grew up. At first, Eric would smile and say he'd marry me when we got older, but that all changed when he went to college, where he met Julia. That summer, Eric came back home from university, and our families gathered for dinner. Eric's mother, as usual, mentioned that when he graduated, he should marry me. But this time, Eric's expression darkened. "Mom, Zoe and I are not suited for each other. I already have someone I like." He stood up and said it loudly. The moment those words left his mouth, silence fell over the room. His mother's face turned red with anger. The dinner naturally ended in discomfort and silence. After that, Eric and I didn't see each other again for the rest of that summer. It wasn't until later that Eric called me, furiously accusing me. "Zoe, was this your doing? What did you tell my mom? Why did she cut off my credit card? He questioned me angrily, as if I had done something wrong, but I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know why his mother had cut off his card, and no matter how much I tried to explain, he wouldn't listen. He hung up on me without letting me say another word. Feeling unsettled, I decided to call his mom and ask. She told me that while Eric was in college, he had been spending over $1,000,000 from the family every month. She had discovered that the girlfriend Eric was seeing at the time wasn't a good person and wanted him to break up with her. But Eric refused to listen. That's why she cut off his card. Zoe, this has nothing to do with you. Eric may not appreciate you, but I do. She comforted me softly. In the year after his financial support was cut off, Eric struggled. He even borrowed money from several of his classmates. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't provide Julia with the luxurious lifestyle she was used to. When Julia realized she could no longer rely on Eric for money, she accepted an offer from Eric's mother, taking 50,000 yuan in exchange for leaving him. But what I never expected was that Eric would blame me for everything that happened. The day Eric broke up with Julia, he came straight to my house. Drunk and stumbling, he pinned me against the wall and kissed me forcefully. Zoe, my mom wants me to marry you. Will you marry me? He asked, his gaze piercing into mine. I stared at his face, the face I had loved since childhood. Despite all the harshness and coldness he'd shown me over the years, I couldn't deny my feelings for him. Of course, I agreed. That night, we ended up in bed together. It felt like a natural progression. But what I hadn't expected was his reaction the next morning. When he woke up and realized it was me beside him, his expression darkened. He didn't say a word, he simply pushed me out of the house. Later, under pressure from his domineering mother, Eric eventually married me. But I knew he never truly forgot about Julia. After the wedding, Eric treated me with distant coldness. He often stayed at the hospital and rarely came home. I tried reaching out to him a few times, but every time I did, he would dismiss me, sending me back with nothing but cold indifference. I knew he couldn't let go of Julia. Eric's mother, after realizing the situation, scolded him several times. Each time, Eric would grow angrier with me, convinced that I was complaining to his mother behind his back. His dissatisfaction with me only deepened. One day, while scrolling through my social media feed, I stumbled upon a post from Eric. In the photo, he was smiling brightly, standing next to Julia. They were holding hands, both of them looking blissfully happy. The comments underneath were filled with compliments, saying how perfect they looked together. After our wedding, Eric hadn't told many of his friends that he was married, so most of them still thought he was single. I even saw one of his friends asking about their wedding date, and to my surprise, Eric replied, "Soon." Seeing all of this, I knew the end of our marriage was near. So when Julia invited me out, saying that Eric would be there too, I agreed to go. In my mind, I assumed they were ready to confront me, to talk about the inevitable divorce. I had already resigned myself to ending things with Eric, but I never expected that it would be my final trip. Chapter 3. My soul hovered above Eric's head as he gently spoon-fed Julia some porridge. His movements were tender, carefully attending to her every need. It had been so long since I'd seen this side of Eric, the soft and caring man I used to know. When we were younger and I fell ill, Eric had taken care of me in the exact same way. Back then, he promised me, "Zoe, don't worry, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. Whenever you're sick, I'll always be there." It was from that moment on that Eric became everything to me. His words still echoed in my ears, but the person receiving his care had long since changed. What I never expected was that not only would Eric break his promise, but he would also become the person who hurt me the most. Suddenly, Eric's phone rang, and he answered quickly. "Dr. Eric, MS. Zoe has passed away." The voice on the other end belonged to the same nurse who had called him earlier. Eric frowned and snorted coldly. "How much did Zoe pay you?" "I know exactly what kind of person she is. She's always playing the victim to get sympathy. You think you'll gain anything by helping her? How could you even lie like that?" Without waiting for a response, Eric hung up the phone immediately. Moments later, the phone rang again. "Doctor, I'm serious. Her body is still here in the hospital. Her parents passed away a long time ago. And you're her husband. About her body. Before the nurse could finish, Eric interrupted her harshly. If you keep talking nonsense, you'll regret it. Don't think I don't know Zoe's tricks. She thinks that by pretending to be sick or even dead, I'll go to see her. Tell her it's not happening. And if you call me again, I'll deal with you too. His voice was loud, filled with rage. The nurse on the other end, now terrified, didn't dare call again. Julia, sitting next to him, spoke softly. Was that Zoe calling you? She might need something. You should go to her, Julia said, her voice feigning innocence as she pretended to cough a few times. It's all my fault. Zoe said she'd pay me to leave you, but I couldn't do it. I didn't want to give you up. Julia's eyes filled with fake tears. I never imagined Zoe would get violent and hit me. I lost control, and the boat overturned. She started crying, putting on an act. Zoe even threatened me, saying that if I didn't leave you, she'd have someone hurt me. Eric, I'm scared. We should just break up, Julia said, her voice trembling with false fear. Hearing Julia twist the truth so blatantly, Eric's expression grew darker. He responded coldly. Don't worry, as long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you. Chapter 4. For 2 days, Eric had remained in Julia's hospital room without leaving, while my body had been lying in the hospital morgue all that time. My soul was trapped near Eric, watching as he doted on Julia every day, showering her with care and attention. Julia, in turn, spent those days feeding him countless lies about me. In her version of the story, I was a vicious, controlling, and deranged woman who had done nothing but harm her. I listened to these fabricated stories, surprised at how evil Julia made me out to be. I never realized, until now, how terrible I supposedly was. But none of it was true. These were things I never did. Then, one day, the door to Julia's hospital room suddenly burst open. Eric's mother stormed in, her face streaked with tears. The moment she saw Eric tenderly feeding Julia fruit, her face darkened with fury. Without hesitation, she marched over and slapped Eric hard across the face. Eric, your wife is dead, and here you are taking care of this mistress? My mother-in-law was livid. When the hospital had informed Eric of my death, he dismissed it, believing it was some sort of trick. He even treated the nurses with contempt, refusing to listen to anything they said. His dismissive and rough behavior had become the gossip of the entire department. Now, everyone in the hospital thought Eric had lost his mind. After all, who jokes about death? The entire hospital knew that Eric was neglecting his wife's death for the sake of his mistress. During the time Eric had spent caring for Julia in her room, his reputation had plummeted. Since Eric refused to take responsibility for my body, the hospital had no choice but to call my mother-in-law. She flew back from overseas the same day. By the time she arrived, the nurses, who had long been fed up with Eric's behavior, told her everything. They explained that my death could have been avoided if Eric had just cared enough to help. I would still be alive, but he didn't, and that negligence had cost me my life. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law almost fainted from shock. Holding back her grief, she rushed to Julia's room, where she saw Eric, and without hesitation, slapped him. The force of the slap left Eric stunned. Mom, even you are in on Zoe's lies? He glared at her, his voice filled with rage. What's so special about her? That woman disgusts me. I was planning to divorce her. You don't need to divorce her. Zoe is already dead. His mother's voice cracked as she screamed the words at him. Impossible. I don't believe it, Eric shouted angrily. You must all be in on this to trick me. Yesterday, Julia even received a message from Zoe, saying she would still take revenge on her. Eric pointed at Julia as he spoke. Yesterday, Julia had opened her phone and played a voice message threatening her to leave Eric. The voice was about 70% similar to mine. Julia acted scared, while Eric was incredibly gentle with her. But to me, it was absolutely disgusting. You really believe everything this woman says? Eric's mother stared at him in disbelief. Was this really the son she had raised all these years? Come with me. I'll show you Zoe's body with your own eyes. You heartless brute. Eric's mother glared at him, furious. She practically had to drag Eric away by force. But Eric didn't care at all. He even shoved his mother aside roughly. "Mom, I know you're working with Zoe to deceive me. You just want me to go see her." Eric's voice was filled with anger as he shouted. "I'm not going to see Zoe." His mother's face turned pale. She looked at her son and found herself at a loss for words. She never expected her son to reach a point where he couldn't tell right from wrong. She stepped forward and slapped Eric hard across the face. "You're a monster. I never should have let Zoe marry you." With those words, she shoved Eric aside and stormed off. Chapter 5. Julia leaned into Eric's arms and whispered, "Eric, I'm so scared. Yesterday, Zoe threatened me, and now your mom is threatening me too." Her voice trembled, but from where I hovered in the air, I could clearly see the smirk at the corner of her mouth. "Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen to you," Eric reassured her. Soon, Eric's mother returned, this time throwing a death certificate down in front of him. "Eric, take a good look," she demanded. Her eyes were filled with disappointment as she stared at her son. She had never imagined he would turn into this kind of person. Eric picked up the death certificate and examined it closely. Since he worked at the hospital, he could easily tell whether it was genuine. But just as he was about to verify it, Julia let out a sudden scream. "Eric, my stomach hurts." Her face was pale as she clung to Eric, her voice trembling with desperation. "Am I dying?" "Don't worry. You're fine." In a panic, Eric tossed aside the death certificate and rushed to comfort her, shoving his mother out of the room in the process. His mother stood outside the door, her face turning pale with rage, and she began to cry uncontrollably. I watched her sob, her heartbreak evident, and I wished I could comfort her, to tell her not to shed tears over me or Eric anymore. After crying her heart out, she composed herself and made arrangements at the hospital, retrieving my body and transferring it to the funeral home. She also notified relatives and friends about my memorial service. Later, she sent Eric a video, footage of my body being taken to the funeral home. When Eric opened the video and saw the scene, he froze, unable to process the reality. He hadn't believed it before. But now, panic set in as he quickly got up and rushed out. "Eric, I'm in so much pain." "Eric," Julia's voice called after him. But this time Eric didn't hear her. He hurried to the funeral home, where he was met by his mother's cold expression. "Mom, how could Zoe be dead?" he stammered, his voice trembling. In that moment, he finally believed it. I was truly gone. His mother remained silent, turning to let Eric enter the memorial hall. When he saw my lifeless body, he stood there, stunned. He reached out, wanting to touch my face, but his mother quickly slapped his hand away. "Don't touch her. You don't deserve to." Eric's mother raised her voice, looking straight at him. "I just want to tell you, Zoe is really dead. And it was you, you heartless beast. Who killed her? You don't deserve to be her husband. How did I ever give birth to such a disgrace?" Her emotions were running high, and she lashed out at Eric with fury. She knew, deep down, that Eric was beyond saving. "Throw him out. He doesn't deserve to attend Zoe's funeral." Eric's mother glared at him, her words laced with venom. Upon hearing this, Eric panicked. "Mom, I'm Zoe's husband. I have to attend," Eric shouted desperately. His plea was met with the cold, unforgiving stare of his mother, and a group of security guards who forcibly threw him out. He stood at the entrance of the hall, trying to get back in, but the guards harshly restrained him. Chapter 6. The funeral went smoothly, with all the friends and relatives in attendance. I had always been kind to others, so everyone was deeply saddened by my sudden death. Eric's mother didn't spare him any dignity and openly revealed all his wrongdoings. Everyone was shocked. No one had ever imagined that the seemingly refined and gentle Eric could be such a person. They cursed him loudly, standing at the entrance to the funeral hall, blocked by a group of security guards. Eric's face was grim, but he had no way to defend himself. When the mourners left the hall, they looked at Eric with disgust. He stood there alone, appearing isolated, but no one pitied him. Everything that had happened was his own doing. After the burial, Eric's mother approached him. "I have something to show you," she said, playing a video for Eric. The footage was from Eric's yacht, the same yacht where Julia and I had our accident. That yacht originally belonged to Eric's mother, as Julia could never afford to buy a yacht herself. After the accident, Eric's mother had the yacht retrieved. Julia had no idea there were surveillance cameras on board, so her claims that I caused the boat to capsize were impossible to believe. In the video, Julia could be seen confronting me, pressuring me to leave Eric. She told me that Eric no longer loved me, and that she was his true love. I replied that Eric should be the one to talk to me. If Eric told me himself that he didn't love me anymore, I would leave. My response clearly didn't satisfy Julia. Looking at me, she suddenly said, "Zoe, what do you think? If you were dead, Eric would definitely love only me, right?" As soon as she finished speaking, she grabbed the yacht's steering wheel and violently yanked it to one side. Given that we were already in the middle of a typhoon, the yacht immediately capsized, and both Julia and I were thrown into the sea. Julia could swim, so she was fine, but I couldn't swim at all. If not for the passing fishing boat that rescued us, I would have drowned in the ocean. After watching the video, Eric trembled uncontrollably. He had never imagined that his perfect first love could be such a person. He lifted his head, stunned, and looked at his mother. "Eric, I know you've always blamed Zoe and thought I scolded you because she toweled on you," his mother said. Her words caused Eric's expression to change. "You have no idea," Eric's mother began, her voice sharp. "After you spent over $1 million on Julia in just 1 month of dating, I started having her investigated." She glared at Eric with pure disdain. "Do you know who Julia really is?" Eric was dumbfounded. In his eyes, Julia had always been gentle, kind, well-educated, and understanding, a rare, perfect woman. But after seeing the video of Julia's true behavior, Eric found himself at a loss for words. For the first time, he wasn't sure what to believe. "Let me show you some information." Eric's mother, her face filled with disappointment, handed over a folder of documents to Eric. Chapter 7. Eric took the folder of documents, and his mother, standing beside him, began to speak. "After just a month of you being with Julia, I had her investigated. Zoe had no idea about Julia's affairs, so how could she have tattled to me?" Eric's mother said coldly. "You probably don't know this, but while Julia was with you, she was also seeing other men, and it wasn't just one. She left you simply because I cut off your finances. She realized there was no more benefit to be had. Then, she moved on and found other men to support her." Eric's mother's face was icy as she continued. "Later, she came to me and asked for money in exchange for leaving you. After she left, Julia had many men in her life over the years. Quite a few of them went bankrupt because of her. She's also a compulsive gambler, drowning in debt." Eric's face turned ashen. He gripped the documents tightly, disbelief written all over his face. "Do you know why she came back this time?" Eric's mother stared at him, her face stern. "She's deep in debt. This time, she came back to get you to marry her, so you can pay off what she owes. Zoe's death is on you. Eric, from now on, I won't have anything to do with you. Starting today, you're on your own." With that, she stood up and walked away, leaving Eric pale and speechless. Meanwhile, my soul hovered above Eric. I watched as Eric broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. He ran to my grave, kneeling before it and begging for forgiveness. His cries were gut-wrenching, but I had no intention of forgiving him. The moment he let go of me to rush to Julia's side, he had lost any chance of redemption. Even now, as he weeps at my grave, I remain unmoved. There is no forgiveness for him. Eric stayed kneeling at my grave until late into the night, before finally getting up to leave. The very next morning, Eric's mother publicly announced that she was severing all ties with him. She even visited an orphanage that same day and adopted a young girl. In front of everyone, she declared that Eric was no longer her son, and from that day forward, Eric ceased to exist in her life. The inheritance? Eric would never see a cent of it. Eric became the outcast of the hospital. After all, who would trust a man who showed no concern for his wife's life, and even refused to see her after her death? He was far from a good person. On top of that, the fact that he had refused to operate on me when he had the chance spread through the hospital like wildfire. It wasn't long before he was fired. Eric became the target of scorn, despised by everyone around him. Lost and broken, Eric left the hospital and returned home. Over the past few days, my soul had stayed by his side, wanting to witness the kind of fate that awaited him. He had started drinking heavily, spending every night in a drunken stupor. After his mother publicly cut ties with him, the first person to abandon him was Julia. Chapter 8. One morning, Eric received a phone call. He woke up early and immediately got in his car to drive somewhere. My soul floated beside him, filled with questions. It didn't take long before I understood where he was headed. He was going to see Julia. When he arrived, Julia was holding the arm of an older man, smiling sweetly and intimately wrapped around him. Both Eric and I saw this, and Eric's face turned dark with anger. For a brief moment, I almost felt sympathy for Eric. He had lost everything for Julia, but she clearly didn't care about him at all. As the older man left, Julia was about to head home, but Eric suddenly appeared and blocked her path. Julia's face immediately changed when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Eric said, his eyes fixed on her. "I know your mother doesn't like me. We're not right for each other," Julia replied softly, already aware that Eric wouldn't be inheriting his family's wealth. Naturally, she had no interest in staying with him anymore. Eric, however, roughly grabbed her arm and shoved her into his car. "Tell me, why did you keep smearing Zoe's name, accusing her of threatening you, even after she's been dead for days?" Eric's bloodshot eyes glared at Julia. Julia trembled in fear, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I was too in love with you, so I lied." Crying, she pleaded. "I was wrong. I'll go to Zoe's grave. I'll apologize to her." "Sure." Eric let out a cold laugh and started driving. As the car sped along, Julia began to panic. "Eric, where are we going?" She realized quickly that they weren't headed toward the cemetery. Going to Zoe's grave would only disgust her. "Since you're so eager to see her, I'll personally send you to meet her." Eric's voice was ice cold. "What are you doing?" Julia screamed, terror creeping into her voice. By now, the sea had come into view, and the car showed no signs of slowing down. At this speed, it was clear they were going to plunge straight into the water. Eric locked the doors and laughed maniacally. "I'm going to find Zoe. I need to repent, to tell her how wrong I was. As for you, you'll repent too. We'll do it together." At this moment, Eric had completely lost his mind. Julia cried out in desperation, but Eric was beyond hearing her. Bang! With a loud crash, Eric's car broke through the guardrail, facing the edge of a cliff. Below the cliff lay the vast ocean. Amid Eric's maniacal laughter and Julia's relentless pleas, I watched as the car plunged into the sea. The water quickly flooded the vehicle. Julia frantically tried to open the door, but Eric had locked it. She was powerless to escape, and soon, both she and Eric drowned, suffocating together in the cold, dark ocean. I floated above, watching as they died. In his final moments, Eric muttered, "Zoe, I was wrong. We grew up together, and now I'm coming to see you, to apologize. I hope in the next life, we can still be husband and wife. If it's possible, in the next life, I will make up for all the pain I caused you. I will protect you, and never let you suffer again. Zoe, in the next life, wait for me." Hearing Eric's words, I shook my head gently. "Eric, I've suffered too much in this life. I hope we never meet again in the future." The end.